It is implied that the game is set in 2001. Henry Townsend is living in South Ashfield, a city that's half a day's drive away from Silent Hill. He is content with his life, living in the South Ashfield Heights apartments. However, one day he finds himself mysteriously locked in his own apartment, room 302. Along with experiencing strange and nightmarish dreams, he cannot escape through either the windows or his front door, which has been chained shut from the inside. No one, not even people standing directly outside of it, can hear him when he pounds on the door and cries for help. The other residents notice Henry's absence, but carry on with their everyday lives. Even with the right key, the superintendent, Frank Sunderland, cannot open room 302. Eileen Galvin, Henry's next-door neighbor in room 303, is concerned about Henry's welfare, though he can only observe her through room 302's peephole and walls. By listening to Eileen, Henry learns that she is passing time in her apartment just before arriving at a friend's party. After 5 days of entrapment, Henry finds a hole that has opened up in his bathroom wall. Armed with only a steel pipe that broke loose when the wall opened, he proceeds to venture into the hellish madness of various otherworlds. The hole leads Henry to a variety of strange areas, inhabited by dangerous and sometimes immortal creatures. He is able to travel between these worlds and his apartment through mysterious holes resembling the halo of the sun. Every time he travels back to his apartment, Henry finds himself waking up on his own bed. In these worlds, Henry witnesses the murders of people who are stuck in corresponding realms like him. The murders also occur in the real world. The victims are Cynthia Velasquez, Jasper Gain, Andrew DeSalvo, and Richard Braintree. As Henry investigates further, he learns more about Walter Sullivan, a serial killer that terrorized Ashfield several years ago and left numbers carved into his victims. Walter was eventually arrested and killed himself soon after. However, these new victims bear similar numbers carved into their bodies, matching Walter's modus operandi, and subsequent events suggest that Walter has come back as a ghost. Walter was born in room 302, and his parents abandoned him immediately after he was born and were never seen again. Frank Sunderland handed the newborn to the medics, and Walter found his way to the Wish House orphanage in the woods outside of Silent Hill, where he was taught occult rituals and teachings of the order. Walter began to believe that room 302 itself was his mother. As an adult, Walter decided to awaken his mother by purifying her through the 21 Sacraments ritual, which required 21 murders. Walter killed 10 people in different ways, and he ended each murder by taking their hearts out. Afterwards, Walter performed the ritual of the Holy Assumption, which allowed him to make himself the 11th victim through suicide and still remain in his own manifested world. The 4 victims that Henry encounters in his wanderings are victims 16 through 19. In Walter's otherworlds, Henry also meets 2 versions of Walter, an immortal adult and a child manifestation conjured by Walter's reminiscences. After exploring Walter's first 4 otherworlds, Henry arrives in the 5th otherworld, an alternate South Ashfield Heights. He sees Walter Sullivan knocking on Eileen's door, and after finding the key that unlocks Eileen's room, Henry witnesses her bleeding to death on her living room floor, having been assaulted by Walter and named the next victim. Eileen thanks Walter's younger self for trying to protect her from his adult self and then passes out. Following Eileen's supposed death, Henry wakes up in room 302 and notices an ambulance on its way to St. Jerome's Hospital. In his apartment, Henry notices hauntings invading from the otherworld. Henry creates a new hole in his laundry room that leads to St. Jerome's Hospital's otherworld, where he discovers Eileen, alive, in one of its rooms. Henry and Eileen decide to stay together and find a way out of Walter's world. Henry takes Eileen to a halo of the sun, however, he realizes that he is the only one who can use them as she is unable to see them. Eileen tells Henry about Joseph Schreiber, room 302's previous resident and a journalist who disappeared 6 months before Henry moved in. Henry and Eileen then decide to go down into the deepest part of him and look for the ultimate truth. After leaving the hospital, Henry and Eileen find themselves on the top of a spiral staircase, full of strange objects such as human limbs and shadowy figures. Each otherworld is connected by the staircase, and Henry and Eileen must descend it in order to find the ultimate truth. The otherworlds are the same as before, except that a few paths that had been blocked before are now accessible and each victim is now a ghost that can be deadly to Henry's health. In the first otherworld revisited, Henry meets the victim Cynthia Velasquez, who has long, flowing black hair that covers her face. In the second otherworld, Henry discovers the ghostly Jasper Gain, who is constantly ablaze. It is while exploring this world that Henry realizes that Walter Sullivan is now pursuing he and Eileen. In the third otherworld revisited, Henry finds the haunted Andrew DeSalvo, who is shirtless and must be pinned down with a sword of obedience in order to continue. While revisiting the fourth otherworld, Henry locates the victim Richard Braintree, who has the ability to teleport. Also in this world, Walter Sullivan kidnaps his younger, manifested self. After defeating the one truth, Henry and Eileen reach the bottom of the spiral staircase and find a dark abyss with room 302 of the past, a memory of Joseph Schreiber's. Henry and Eileen meet Joseph Schreiber in room 302 of the past, who appears as a statue in the ceiling. He tells them about Walter's history and reveals that these otherworlds are a creation of Walter's Holy Assumption ritual. Before his voice fades away, Joseph tells them that they are the last victims, Eileen, the Mother Reborn, and Henry, the Receiver of Wisdom. They must kill Walter in order to prevent the 21 Sacraments, or else he will kill them. In room 302, Henry is shocked and speechless when he discovers a sealed room in his apartment that contains Walter Sullivan's crucified corpse. After using the keys found in Walter's coat pocket, Henry unlocks his chained front door and is bewildered that South Ashfield Heights has also been transformed into a sickening realm. Eileen then appears in the corridor, and they reunite. In the apartment otherworld, Henry examines 6 hanged corpses. Each one eliminates a chain that is forbidding entry to the superintendent's room and has a memory of Walter's father's voice. Inside Frank Sunderland's room, Henry discovers Walter's umbilical cord that Frank had kept in a box for decades. Henry suddenly sees flashes of Walter's memories in his mind, and he falls to the floor with a massive headache. Eileen tries to comfort him, but she leaves to find Walter's child self on her own, and they separate. Henry returns to room 302 and discovers that Walter's corpse has disappeared. Underneath where Walter's corpse was lies a round, black abyss. Henry enters the abyss and comes across a large room with a spiked, spinning mechanism in the center with a pool of blood surrounding it. There are also 8 spears and a giant monster resembling a torso in the room. Walter Sullivan confronts Henry, who realizes that Eileen is possessed and is about to walk into the large mechanism, unconsciously killing herself. The final fight of the game takes place. Henry uses Walter's umbilical cord on the monster, allowing him to spear it. Walter then loses his immortality and Henry defeats him. Endings. The game has a total of 4 possible endings. Unlike the previous 3 installments, there is no UFO ending. It is also unknown which ending is canon. There are 2 factors that determine the ending. 1. If Henry saves Eileen in time during the final battle. If Eileen was injured too much during the game, it may be impossible to save her. However, Henry can place holy candles to slow her down. 2. If Henry cleared 80% of the room 302 hauntings throughout the game. The endings are: escape. After Walter falls to the floor, he raises his arm, calling out, "Mom," before he goes motionless. The room starts to shake, and Eileen, still alive and no longer possessed, slumps to the ground. Henry calls her name and reaches out to her. Young Walter knocks on room 302's door in Walter's apartment world, calling to his mother to let him in. He then falls to his knees into the floor, fading away. After he disappears, the door leading to Henry's apartment opens. Next, Henry is walking away from South Ashfield Heights, and he looks back and then continues on, saying Eileen's name. One day later, Henry visits Eileen in a normal hospital. Henry smiles and gives Eileen a bouquet of flowers, alluding that their relationship has strengthened over their previous recognition of one another. Eileen says to him, "Guess I'll have to find a new place to live, huh?" This ending is considered the best. To obtain it, the player must save Eileen and clear at least 80% of Henry's apartment of hauntings. Mother. This scene is the same as escape, except when Henry visits Eileen in the hospital, she tells him, "Well, I guess I can go back to South Ashfield Heights now." Henry's apartment is then shown as it was at the beginning of the game, covered in blood and rust, implying that spirits still haunt room 302 and that Eileen may still be possessed. To obtain it, the player must save Eileen, but not clear at least 80% of Henry's apartment of hauntings. Eileen's death. After Walter falls to the floor, he raises his arm, calling out, "Mom," before he goes motionless. The room starts to shake. Young Walter knocks on room 302's door in his apartment world, calling out for his mother to let him in. He then falls to his knees into the floor, fading away. After he disappears, the door leading to Henry's apartment opens. Henry sits up in his bed once more and then hears on the radio, to his despair, that Eileen has died of her wounds. After Henry finds out about Eileen's death, he falls to his knees and says her name. To obtain it, the player must let Eileen die, but they do have to clear at least 80% of Henry's apartment of hauntings. 21 Sacraments. After Walter falls to the floor, he raises his arm, calling out, "Mom," before he goes motionless. Henry stares down at him, and then suddenly falls to his knees, holding his head in pain. He then stands up, as if possessed by Walter. Young Walter then appears in room 302 as it was at the beginning of the game, with blood and rust. He cuddles up to the couch saying, "I'm home, I won't let anyone get in the way. I'm gonna stay with you forever." The radio turns on with a news bulletin announcing the deaths of Eileen, Henry, and others, as the adult Walter lies motionless against a wall. To obtain it, the player must let Eileen die and not clear at least 80% of Henry's apartment of hauntings.